The restaurant was buzzing with energy as people in elegant clothes laughed and chatted over sparkling glasses of champagne. Among the clatter of cutlery and the hum of conversation, a young waitress moved gracefully between tables, carrying trays with drinks and plates of food. She had been working there for a few years now, and though the work was hard and often thankless, she did it with a smile. She knew every table, every guest's preference, and even the tiniest detail mattered. Her life outside of the restaurant was quiet and simple. She lived in a small apartment nearby, modest but clean, filled with little reminders of her passion. On a corner shelf, a small, well-used notebook lay open, filled with music notes scribbled in pencil. A second-hand keyboard sat in the living room, its keys a little worn, but it was her most treasured possession. Every evening, after long shifts, she would sit down and play for hours, letting her fingers dance across the keys and her imagination fill the room with melodies only she could hear. She had always loved music. It had been her escape, her way to forget about the struggles of life and feel something bigger than herself. People at the restaurant knew her as cheerful, polite, and hardworking, but no one knew about the music that lived in her heart. It was her secret, her hidden talent, and she didn't share it with anyone except for her small, worn-out keyboard at home. Today, however, the energy in the restaurant felt different. There was an air of excitement that buzzed through the room. The owner had organized a special event, a gathering for some of the wealthiest guests in the city. The tables were covered with white linens, sparkling cutlery, and elaborate centerpieces. Waiters and waitresses moved swiftly, serving delicacies that looked like works of art. She was assigned to one of the busiest sections, a corner where several important guests were seated. As she balanced a tray full of drinks, she overheard some of the guests making light-hearted comments about the staff. They laughed among themselves, assuming that no one from the restaurant could possibly impress them. She felt a twinge of irritation but kept her composure. She had learned long ago that patience and a polite smile could get her through anything. Between serving tables, she stole glances at the grand piano in the corner of the room. It was beautiful, polished to a shine, and it called to her in a way she couldn't ignore. She had played that instrument countless times in her imagination, imagining herself performing for a crowd that actually appreciated her music. Today, though, she knew she couldn't risk it. She was just a waitress here, not a performer, and the wealthy guests would never take her seriously. Still, she couldn't help but watch as people admired the piano. The way the light hit its keys, making them gleam, made her heart ache with longing. She remembered the first time she had sat in front of a piano, fingers trembling over the keys, unsure if she could even make a sound that anyone would like. But as soon as the notes rang out, she had known that music was her calling. It was the first time she had felt truly alive. The evening went on, and she worked tirelessly, moving from table to table, ensuring every guest had everything they needed. Despite the exhaustion, she felt a quiet satisfaction in doing her job well. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and she took pride in it. She had learned that no matter how small a role seemed, giving it her best effort made a difference. As the night progressed, a few of the younger guests joked loudly about the staff, questioning whether any of them had talents beyond serving food and pouring wine. The waitress caught bits of their conversation, smiling politely but inwardly feeling a spark of determination. She wished she could show them that talent wasn't always obvious, that it could be hidden behind a simple apron and a polite smile. In the kitchen, she took a brief moment to breathe, her hands slightly trembling from carrying heavy trays for hours. She leaned against the counter, closing her eyes for a second, and imagined the piano again. She could see herself sitting there, fingers moving effortlessly, music flowing through the room, and for a moment, she allowed herself to dream. She remembered the long hours she had spent practicing at home, sometimes until late at night, her neighbors knocking to remind her it was too loud. She had never complained. Each practice session was a step closer to something she didn't fully understand yet, a way to express herself, to communicate feelings words could not convey. Music was her secret world, and she loved it more than anything else. Back on the floor, the guests were beginning to gather in small groups, discussing the event and enjoying the fine cuisine. Some of them glanced at the piano, not with admiration but curiosity, wondering who, if anyone, might play it tonight. The waitress served a tray of desserts with practiced ease, smiling as she handed each guest their plate. Their eyes never lingered on her in any meaningful way. She was just part of the background, another staff member moving efficiently but unnoticed. As she moved past the grand piano again, she felt an inexplicable pull. Something inside her stirred, a feeling that tonight could be different, that maybe, just maybe, the world could see the part of her that had been hidden for so long. She shook the thought away quickly, reminding herself that she had responsibilities here. Real ones, and this wasn't the time for dreams. Still, she noticed a few guests whispering near the piano, curious and intrigued. One of them even joked loudly, asking if anyone could play. The crowd laughed, assuming it was a ridiculous question. The waitress felt her heart skip a beat. The piano seemed to be calling her, and for the first time, she felt a bold idea forming in her mind. She went back to serving, trying to focus on her work, but the music in her mind grew louder, more insistent. She imagined herself at the piano, the sound of the keys under her fingers, the music filling the room and silencing all doubts. It was a beautiful image, so vivid that she almost forgot she was holding a tray of drinks. By the time the desserts were served and the last plates cleared, the waitress had a decision to make. She could continue her shift quietly, unnoticed, or she could step forward and let her talent shine, even if only for a moment. The thought terrified her, but it also excited her. She realized that this could be the chance she had been waiting for, the one moment that could change everything. The restaurant began to quiet down as the night wore on. Guests lingered in small groups, sipping wine and chatting about the evening. The piano sat silently in the corner, polished and perfect, almost daring someone to play it. The waitress took a deep breath, wiping her hands on her apron, and felt the familiar surge of courage that came whenever she imagined herself at the piano. She knew it wouldn't be easy. The wealthy crowd had expectations, and she was just a waitress. But for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that talent and passion mattered more than appearances. The music inside her was strong, and maybe, just maybe, it was time for the world to hear it. With that thought, she moved closer to the piano, feeling her heart race. The night had started like any other, with laughter, service, and polite smiles, but now it felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, though no one knew it yet. And as she positioned herself at the keys, her hands hovering just above them, she felt the quiet thrill of possibility. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when her hidden world could finally meet reality. And deep inside, she knew that whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The waitress had never imagined that her quiet life could intersect with such an opulent event. As she stood near the piano, her hands hovering above the keys, she could feel the weight of the room around her. The wealthy guests, still engaged in their conversations, occasionally glanced at the piano with amusement, not expecting anyone from the staff to dare approach it. She felt a mixture of excitement and fear, a strange combination that made her heart race. One of the older guests, a man with a sharp suit and a critical gaze, noticed her standing there. He leaned back in his chair and whispered something to the person next to him, a smirk forming on his face. The waitress caught the words, or at least the tone, and knew exactly what he was thinking. That no one like her could ever play, that she was just a waitress, unworthy of the piano or the attention it might bring. She felt a tiny spark of defiance. She wasn't going to let their expectations define her. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she positioned herself on the bench. She had played piano countless times at home, but never in front of a crowd like this. Never with eyes full of judgment watching her every move. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, and reminded herself that music didn't care about status or wealth. It only cared about passion and practice. She could do this. As she pressed her fingers lightly onto the keys, a few guests turned fully toward her, some still skeptical, others curious. A young man in a designer suit chuckled and whispered to his companion, "I bet she can't even play a simple tune." The waitress felt a brief pang of embarrassment, but it was quickly replaced by determination. She didn't need their approval. She only needed to play. The first note resonated through the room, soft and deliberate. It was simple, almost hesitant, but it carried a kind of quiet beauty that made some heads tilt in surprise. She allowed herself a small smile, encouraging herself to continue. With each note, her confidence grew, and the music began to flow more freely, weaving through the room like a gentle current. The skeptical whispers faded, replaced by the sound of attentive silence. The guests who had been so sure of her inability began to exchange glances, noticing the skill and emotion in her playing. She didn't just press the keys. She told a story with each movement, each rise and fall of melody. Her music filled the space, wrapping around the luxurious decorations, the laughter, and the clinking glasses, transforming the atmosphere entirely. The once judgmental crowd now found themselves captivated, drawn into the world she was creating with her talent. The waitress's mind wandered briefly to her life outside the restaurant, to the small apartment where she had spent countless nights practicing alone. She remembered her first hesitant attempts, the hours of repetition, the frustration when her fingers wouldn't do what her mind imagined. And she thought of the little notebook filled with music notes, the place where she first dreamed of moments like this. The thought gave her strength, reminding her that all those quiet hours had led to this one opportunity. A few of the guests tried to hide their astonishment, pretending to sip their drinks or look at their phones, but it was impossible. The music was too powerful, too moving. Even the critical man in the sharp suit, who had initially doubted her, found himself leaning forward, listening intently. He could not deny the skill and emotion pouring from the young waitress, a talent that seemed to come from somewhere far beyond her humble appearance. As she continued, the melody shifted from soft and tentative to bold and expressive. She allowed herself to feel the music fully, moving with it, letting it guide her fingers across the keys. The room, once filled with chatter and casual laughter, was now silent, each guest completely absorbed in the performance. She noticed a few faces pressed close together, eyes wide with admiration, and a strange warmth spread through her chest. She had their attention, their respect, even if just for these few minutes. The waitress felt a surge of joy. For so long, her music had been her private world, her sanctuary, and now she was sharing it with people who might never have expected to hear something so beautiful from someone like her. The thought made her heart swell. She wasn't performing for fame or money. She was performing because it was a part of her, a gift she could no longer keep hidden. One of the younger guests, the one who had laughed earlier, could no longer contain himself. He whispered in disbelief to his companion, "I can't believe she's actually this good." The companion nodded, equally stunned, both of them realizing that talent could not be judged by appearances alone. The waitress, though she didn't know what they said, could feel the shift in the energy of the room. The skepticism had been replaced by awe, and it fueled her to play even more passionately. The melody grew richer, more intricate, with subtle flourishes and unexpected harmonies. The young waitress had a natural sense of timing, of emotion, that made every note resonate deeply. It wasn't just technical skill. It was a connection to something larger, something that could reach anyone willing to listen. And in that moment, every fear, every doubt, every worry about being judged or overlooked melted away. She was not just a waitress. She was a musician, and this was her moment. The crowd was now completely engaged, leaning forward in their chairs, their earlier assumptions forgotten. Some whispered to each other, clearly amazed, while others simply listened in silence, letting the music wash over them. She could see the expressions of surprise, admiration, and even joy on their faces, and it made her smile, a real, genuine smile that came from deep within. She didn't rush. She allowed the music to breathe, to grow naturally, letting each phrase lead to the next. The piano, once just an object in the corner of a luxurious room, had become a vessel for her emotions, for her story. Every note she played carried a part of her journey, the quiet determination, the long hours of practice, the hope that one day, someone would truly see her. And then, almost without realizing it, the performance reached a gentle, lingering conclusion. Her hands rested lightly on the keys, the final notes fading into silence. For a moment, the room was still, as if the world itself had paused to take in what had just happened. The wealthy guests, who had only moments before been doubting her abilities, were now completely captivated, their faces showing a mix of astonishment and respect. Applause broke out, soft at first, then growing louder, more enthusiastic. The young waitress felt a warm rush of emotion, a combination of relief, pride, and joy. She had done it. She had stepped out of her quiet, everyday world and shown something extraordinary, something that could not be ignored. The guests who had doubted her now looked at her with admiration, some even approaching to offer compliments, astonished that such talent could come from someone they had underestimated. The waitress sat back, still catching her breath, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. She had always loved music, but tonight, she had realized that her music could reach beyond the walls of her small apartment, beyond the life she had always known. It could touch people, inspire them, and even change how they saw her. And in that realization, she felt a spark of hope for what the future might hold. As the room slowly returned to its usual chatter, the guests now talking in hushed tones about her performance, she returned to her duties with a quiet pride. She carried trays and refilled glasses, but now there was a difference. She moved with a newfound confidence, aware that she had left an impression that would not be forgotten. The laughter and whispers no longer carried judgment but curiosity, admiration, and respect. The night continued, but for her, it had already been transformed. She had faced a challenge, stepped into the unknown, and emerged with something she had never experienced before: recognition for her true talent. And though she was still a waitress, serving drinks and plates of food, she knew that she had crossed a threshold. Something had changed, not just in the eyes of the guests, but in her own heart. She had proven to herself that courage, combined with passion and skill, could create moments of magic, even in the most unexpected places. The applause had barely faded when the young waitress realized that the room had completely transformed. The wealthy guests, who had only moments ago doubted her ability, were now fully captivated. Some whispered to each other, pointing subtly toward her, while others simply sat back, mesmerized by the way her fingers moved across the piano keys. Each note carried a story, a feeling that seemed to transcend the grandiose surroundings and reach deep into the hearts of those listening. She took a moment to center herself, inhaling slowly and letting the silence settle around her. The first few notes had been deliberate, cautious, but now she felt a wave of confidence wash over her. She allowed herself to dive deeper into the music, letting her emotions guide her fingers. The melody grew more intricate, each chord blending seamlessly into the next, creating a tapestry of sound that filled the room. For the first time in her life, she played not just for herself, but for the people before her. She wanted them to feel what she felt, to understand that music was not about appearances or status but about passion and expression. The laughter and chatter that had once dominated the room had vanished, replaced by an attentive, almost reverent silence. Even the guests who had previously been mocking her now leaned forward, eyes wide, completely absorbed. The young waitress remembered her evenings spent alone at home, practicing until her fingers ached, determined to perfect each piece. She recalled the quiet nights when she would close her eyes and imagine performing for an audience that could understand and appreciate her. Tonight, that dream had come true in ways she had never expected. She could see it in the eyes of the guests, the surprise, the admiration, and the genuine respect that she had longed for. She let her hands move more freely now, allowing the music to flow naturally. There was a lightness to her touch, a sense of joy that seemed to radiate from her very being. The grand piano, once just a piece of furniture in a luxurious room, had become an extension of herself, a channel through which she could communicate her deepest emotions. Each note was deliberate, yet effortless, a reflection of years of dedication and countless hours of practice. A few of the guests exchanged astonished glances, unable to believe that such talent could come from someone they had dismissed as just a waitress. One woman leaned closer to her companion and whispered, I never imagined anyone like her could play like that. The companion nodded, equally stunned, both of them recognizing that they had been completely wrong to judge her based on her appearance. The melody began to shift, moving from soft, flowing notes to more powerful, expressive chords. She felt her heart racing, not with fear, but with exhilaration. The music became a conversation between herself and the audience, each note a word, each chord a sentence. She could sense the emotions of the room changing, the skepticism giving way to awe, the doubt turning into admiration. She was no longer just playing the piano. She was telling a story, one that the guests could feel in their own hearts. As she played, she noticed small details. The way a guest's eyes glistened with emotion, the subtle nod of approval from someone who had been skeptical, the quiet smiles that spread across several faces. These were the moments that made her performance meaningful, the moments that reminded her why she had dedicated so much of her life to music. She wasn't performing for fame or recognition. She was performing to connect, to share a piece of herself with the world. The room seemed to shrink around her, the luxurious decorations and fine dining fading into the background. There was only the music and the people who were listening. Every chord she struck, every delicate note she played, seemed to reach out and touch the audience in a way that transcended words. She felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that her talent could inspire and move people, even those who had initially doubted her. A young man who had been laughing at her earlier could no longer hide his astonishment. He leaned toward his friend, whispering in disbelief, "She's incredible. I never expected this." The friend nodded silently, both of them clearly impressed. The waitress, though focused entirely on her music, felt a subtle warmth knowing that she had changed their perception with her performance. She continued to play, allowing the melody to grow richer, more complex. The intricate harmonies and subtle nuances in her playing captured the attention of everyone in the room. Even the older guests, who had initially been skeptical and critical, were now completely absorbed, some leaning forward in their chairs, others closing their eyes to better appreciate the music. She could feel the collective energy of the room, a shared appreciation for something genuine and beautiful. Her mind drifted briefly to her own life, to the small apartment where she had spent countless nights practicing in solitude. She remembered the frustrations, the moments of self-doubt, and the times when she had wondered if her efforts would ever be recognized. Tonight, all of those experiences culminated in a single moment of triumph. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician, capable of touching hearts and leaving a lasting impression. The music began to reach its climax, each note more powerful than the last. She felt an intense connection to the piano, as if it were an extension of herself, translating her emotions into sound. The audience was completely captivated, leaning in, their eyes wide with wonder, their breaths held in anticipation. She played with a freedom she had never experienced before, unafraid of judgment, unafraid of failure. This was her moment and she embraced it fully. As the final notes lingered in the air, the room fell silent for a brief moment, as if no one could quite believe what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the audience. It started as a few scattered claps, then grew louder, more enthusiastic, until the entire room was applauding, some standing to give a standing ovation. The young waitress felt a rush of emotion, a mix of relief, pride, and joy. She had done it. She had shared her gift with the world, and the world had responded with admiration and respect. Several guests approached her, offering compliments and expressing their amazement at her talent. They spoke with genuine admiration, no trace of the earlier skepticism. The young waitress accepted their praise with grace, feeling a sense of validation she had never experienced before. She realized that talent and passion could not be hidden forever, and that sometimes the right moment was all it took to reveal what had always been there. As she returned to her duties, carrying trays and refilling glasses, she felt a newfound confidence. The guests, now aware of her extraordinary ability, treated her with a level of respect that went beyond polite manners. She moved with ease and assurance, aware that she had left a lasting impression. The night, which had started like any other, had been transformed into something remarkable, a turning point in her life and career. The young waitress reflected on the experience as she continued to work, her thoughts filled with the music she had played and the reactions she had received. She knew that this night would remain etched in her memory forever. It had shown her the power of courage, the importance of believing in oneself, and the incredible impact that talent, when shared, could have on others. And deep inside, she felt a quiet determination to continue pursuing her passion, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey that had already changed her life. The young waitress continued to play, each note more confident and expressive than the last. The music had become a living thing, flowing through the room and touching every person present. The wealthy guests, who had only moments ago been chatting and laughing, were now completely silent, their attention fixed on the piano and the young woman who seemed to be bringing it to life. Each chord carried emotion, every delicate flourish revealing the depth of her talent and the dedication she had poured into her music over the years. As she played, she felt a sense of freedom unlike anything she had ever experienced. The nervousness that had gripped her when she first approached the piano had completely faded, replaced by an overwhelming sense of purpose. She was no longer just a waitress in a crowded restaurant. She was an artist, telling a story that transcended words. She let her fingers glide across the keys, sometimes gently, sometimes with force, creating a rhythm that filled the room with energy and emotion. Some of the guests leaned forward in their chairs, unable to take their eyes off her hands as they moved so effortlessly. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling the emotions that were hidden in each note. The young waitress noticed the subtle changes in their expressions, the widening of eyes, the slight nods of approval, the small smiles of admiration, and it filled her with a quiet joy. She was connecting with them in a way that words could never achieve. The melody shifted, moving from soft, gentle notes to a more dynamic and powerful sequence. She felt her heart racing with excitement, her emotions guiding her hands. Every chord seemed to echo her journey, from the quiet, humble nights spent practicing alone to this moment, where her talent was finally being recognized. She played with a sense of urgency, pouring everything she had into the music, letting it tell the story of her life and her dreams. A few of the guests who had been the most skeptical began to exchange astonished glances. One older man leaned toward his companion, whispering, "I never imagined someone like her could play like that." The companions simply shook their head, equally amazed, both of them realizing that they had underestimated her based on her appearance. The young waitress, though focused entirely on her music, felt a subtle pride knowing that she was changing their perception. She continued to play, allowing the melody to flow naturally, each note building upon the last. The room seemed to shrink around her, the luxury and grandeur fading away, leaving only the music and the emotions it carried. She felt a deep connection with the audience, sensing their reactions and letting them guide her performance. The music had become a conversation, a dialogue between her and everyone listening, and she reveled in the connection. As she played, memories of her life outside the restaurant surfaced. She remembered the small apartment where she had spent countless nights practicing, often until her fingers ached. She recalled the moments of frustration, when the notes wouldn't come out right, and the moments of triumph, when a difficult piece finally clicked. Every struggle, every late night, had led her to this moment, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had shaped her. The music grew more intricate, with subtle harmonies and delicate flourishes that revealed her technical skill and emotional depth. She had spent years mastering the piano, but it was the passion behind her playing that truly captivated the audience. They could feel the sincerity in every note, the honesty in every chord, and it moved them in a way that went beyond admiration. It touched something deep within them. A young man who had laughed at her earlier could no longer hide his amazement. He whispered to his friend, "She's incredible. I've never heard anyone play like that." The friend nodded silently, both of them clearly impressed. The young waitress, though focused on the music, felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had proven her talent and changed their perception. She allowed the melody to reach its crescendo, the music swelling and filling every corner of the room. Her fingers danced across the keys with precision and emotion, creating a sense of movement and energy that captivated everyone present. The guests were completely absorbed, their previous judgments forgotten, replaced by awe and admiration. The young waitress played with a sense of freedom, unafraid of failure or criticism, completely immersed in the music. The piano seemed to respond to her touch, each note resonating with clarity and power. She could feel the energy of the room, the collective attention of the audience, and it fueled her performance. The music was no longer just a personal expression. It had become a shared experience, a moment that united everyone in the room through the beauty of sound and emotion. As she approached the final sequence, the young waitress felt a mixture of exhilaration and calm. The music had taken her on a journey, from the quiet moments of practice at home to this public display of talent. She wanted the ending to leave a lasting impression, to convey everything she had felt and experienced in a way that words could never capture. She played the final notes with care, each one deliberate, resonant, and full of emotion. The last chord lingered in the air, a soft, fading echo that seemed to hang over the room. For a brief moment, there was complete silence, as if time itself had paused to acknowledge the performance. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the audience, growing louder and louder until the room was filled with enthusiastic clapping and cheering. Some guests rose to their feet, giving her a standing ovation, while others whispered words of admiration and awe. The young waitress felt a surge of emotion, a mix of relief, pride, and joy. She had done it. She had shared her gift with the world, and the world had responded with admiration and respect. She allowed herself a small smile, feeling the warmth of the moment and the recognition she had longed for. The applause continued, a testament to her talent and the impact of her performance. Several guests approached her, offering compliments and expressing their amazement. They spoke with genuine admiration, no trace of the earlier skepticism. The young waitress accepted their praise with grace, feeling a sense of validation and accomplishment. She had shown them that talent and passion could not be judged by appearances, and that sometimes the most unexpected individuals could create the most profound impact. As she returned to her duties, carrying trays and refilling glasses, she felt a newfound confidence. The guests now treated her with respect and interest, aware of the extraordinary talent she possessed. The night, which had started like any other, had been transformed into a moment of recognition and triumph, a turning point in her life and career. The young waitress reflected on the experience as she moved through the room, her thoughts filled with the music she had played and the reactions she had received. She knew that this night would remain etched in her memory forever. It had shown her the power of courage, the importance of believing in oneself, and the incredible impact that sharing one's passion could have on others. And deep inside, she felt a quiet determination to continue pursuing her music, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey that had already changed her life. The young waitress sat for a moment, letting her fingers rest lightly on the keys as the last echoes of her performance faded into the room. The audience remained captivated, many still clapping, some with their mouths slightly open in astonishment. The room, once filled with chatter, now hummed with admiration and respect for the talent that had emerged from such an unexpected source. Slowly, the applause swelled, more enthusiastic than ever. Guests who had initially doubted her ability were now among the loudest in the room, clapping and cheering as if they had witnessed something rare and extraordinary. A few even rose to their feet, offering her a standing ovation that left her heart racing with emotion. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had never imagined that her music could have such an impact on people she had thought would never understand it. Some of the guests approached her cautiously, almost as if they weren't sure how to address someone they had previously underestimated. They spoke in hushed tones, praising her skill, her expression, and the emotion she had conveyed through her music. One guest said, "I never expected someone like you to play like that. That was truly incredible." The young waitress smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She accepted the compliments with grace, though inside, she felt a mix of disbelief and pride. The experience was overwhelming. She had worked quietly for years, practicing in the solitude of her small apartment, never seeking recognition, only fulfillment. Tonight, her hidden world had spilled into reality, and it had been met with awe. She could see the shift in the room, the change in perception, the newfound respect, and the way her music had connected with people in a way that words could not. It was a powerful reminder that true talent could not be ignored forever. A few guests lingered near the piano, unable to pull themselves away from the young waitress. They asked questions about her background, how she had learned to play, and where she had trained. She answered politely, trying to maintain her composure, though her mind was spinning with the realization that she had truly been seen, that her gift had been acknowledged in a way that went far beyond casual praise. The room was buzzing with excitement, but it was different now. There was no longer judgment or skepticism, only admiration. People who had once dismissed her as just a waitress were now engaging with her as a musician, eager to know more about the person behind the performance. They asked for her story, wanting to understand the journey that had led to such an extraordinary display of talent. As she continued to move through the crowd, serving drinks and small plates, she noticed the subtle changes in the way people looked at her. The polite smiles had been replaced with genuine curiosity and respect. Guests were listening to her responses, nodding, and offering words of encouragement. It was a world away from the doubt and mockery that had greeted her just an hour before. She realized that her courage in stepping forward had not only showcased her talent, but had also shifted perceptions, opening doors that she had never imagined would exist. The young waitress felt a deep sense of gratitude. She thought about the long nights of practice, the moments of frustration, the times when she had questioned whether her efforts would ever be recognized. All of those experiences had led to this moment, and now she understood that every struggle had been worth it. Her music had the power to move people, to change the way they saw her and perhaps even the way they saw others. A few of the younger guests, who had been mocking her earlier, approached with shy smiles, clearly unsure of how to express their admiration. They said, "We were wrong. That was amazing. We didn't expect this at all." She smiled gently, realizing that her performance had given them a lesson in humility, a reminder that appearances could be deceiving and that talent often lay where least expected. The wealthy man who had first doubted her skill now stood nearby, watching her with a mix of awe and respect. He nodded slightly, acknowledging her talent without words, a gesture that spoke volumes. It was a moment of quiet validation, and it filled her with a sense of accomplishment she could scarcely put into words. As the evening continued, the guests began discussing her performance among themselves, recounting the emotion and skill they had witnessed. Some were inspired, talking about the power of hidden talent and the importance of giving everyone a chance. Others reflected on their assumptions, realizing how easily they had judged someone based on their role or appearance. The young waitress listened, quietly proud, feeling the ripple effect of her music reach far beyond her own immediate experience. She returned to her duties with a sense of calm confidence, aware that something had shifted in the room and within herself. The performance had not only showcased her talent, but had also opened her eyes to the possibilities that lay ahead. She had discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed, the courage to step into the spotlight, to share her gift with the world, and to command respect through her skill and dedication. Throughout the rest of the evening, she noticed guests stealing glances at her, whispering among themselves, or simply smiling in recognition of what she had accomplished. Some approached her with offers or suggestions, asking if she would consider performing at future events or private gatherings. Each offer made her heart race with excitement and possibility. It was a reminder that talent, when shared, could create opportunities that might have seemed impossible before. As she moved through the crowd, interacting with the guests, she reflected on her journey. From the quiet, modest beginnings of learning piano alone in her small apartment to this moment of public recognition, she realized that perseverance, passion, and courage had brought her here. She understood that her life was changing, not just because of the applause or admiration, but because she had proven to herself that she was capable of stepping beyond her comfort zone and embracing the opportunities that came her way. the young waitress felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had always loved music, and now she understood that sharing her talent was not just a privilege but a responsibility. Her performance had reminded her that even in unexpected places, beauty and skill could shine through. She had connected with people on a profound level, showing them the depth of her passion and the dedication she had invested in her craft. As the event began to wind down, the guests offered their final compliments, many lingering to speak with her personally. They were sincere, their admiration heartfelt, and the young waitress accepted their words with a sense of humility and pride. She knew that tonight had marked a turning point, a moment when her hidden world had merged with reality, creating an experience that would remain with her and the audience forever. As she finally returned to a quieter section of the restaurant, she allowed herself a deep breath, feeling the exhaustion of the night mixed with an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. The applause, the admiration, the respect she had earned. They were tangible reminders that her talent could no longer be hidden. She had left a lasting impression on a room full of people who had doubted her. And in doing so, she had discovered a confidence that would carry her forward into the next chapter of her life. The young waitress took one last look at the grand piano before stepping away. She had transformed the night, leaving the wealthy crowd speechless and inspired. More importantly, she had transformed herself, recognizing the value of her talent and the power of stepping into the spotlight. From that moment on, she knew that her journey as a musician had truly begun, and the possibilities were endless. After the applause had died down and the last guests had slowly begun to leave, the young waitress remained by the piano for a moment, letting the silence settle around her. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, savoring the echo of the music that had filled the room just minutes before. Her heart was still racing, and a sense of fulfillment spread through her chest. She had done more than play a song. She had shared a part of herself, her life, and her dreams, and the response had been more overwhelming than she could have ever imagined. She carefully stepped away from the piano, feeling both exhaustion and exhilaration. Her duties were far from over, but her perspective had shifted. The restaurant, the wealthy guests, the sparkling glasses and elegant linens. All of it seemed different now. The same space that had once felt ordinary and intimidating now felt like a place where she had left her mark. She realized that this night would remain etched in her memory forever. A turning point not just in her work life, but in her sense of self. As she moved through the dining area, clearing tables and refilling drinks, she noticed small but meaningful changes. Guests who had once overlooked her now offered smiles, nods, and kind words. Some asked her questions about her background, expressing genuine curiosity about how she had learned to play so beautifully. Others encouraged her to perform again, hinting at opportunities that might have seemed unimaginable only hours ago. Every interaction left her feeling a quiet sense of pride and a deeper understanding of the value of her talent. When the last of the guests had departed, the young waitress finally had a moment to herself. She leaned against the counter, closing her eyes briefly, allowing the adrenaline and excitement of the night to settle into a calm sense of satisfaction. Memories of her life outside the restaurant drifted into her mind. The long evenings spent practicing in solitude, the nights when her fingers ached but she kept playing, the small victories that had built her skill over time. All of it had led to this moment, and she felt an overwhelming gratitude for the journey she had taken. She thought about the people who had doubted her, the wealthy guests who had assumed that she could not possess talent because of her job. She realized that their doubt had only fueled her determination. Their skepticism had been a challenge, one that she had met not with words but with action, with music that spoke louder than any argument ever could. It was a powerful reminder that talent and dedication could overcome prejudice and assumption, and that courage could transform even the most ordinary moments into extraordinary experiences. The young waitress allowed herself to dream for a moment, imagining the possibilities that could come from this night. Invitations to perform at other events, opportunities to meet people who appreciated her skill, and the chance to explore her musical passion more fully, all seemed within reach. She knew that her journey was just beginning, that this night was only the first chapter of a story she was now ready to write. The thought filled her with excitement and a quiet confidence that had not been there before. She returned to the kitchen, where her co-workers were finishing up their tasks for the evening. They noticed a change in her demeanor, the way she carried herself with a newfound poise, the quiet glow of satisfaction in her eyes. They asked how the performance had gone, and she smiled, telling them simply that it had been a success. Inside, she knew it had been much more than that. She had discovered the impact of sharing her talent, the power of stepping into the spotlight, and the importance of believing in herself. Later, as she walked home, the cool night air brushing against her face, she reflected on the evening. The streets were quiet, the city lights twinkling in the distance, and she felt a sense of calm and purpose. She thought about the grand piano, now silent, and the wealthy guests who had been left speechless by her music. She felt a sense of connection with them, as if her music had spoken across social barriers, touching hearts in a way that went beyond words or social status. It was a powerful lesson in the universality of talent and passion. At her small apartment, she set down her bag and glanced at her well-used keyboard, a familiar friend that had witnessed so many of her private moments of practice and creativity. She sat down and let her fingers wander across the keys, playing softly, allowing the music to fill the room. It was a private moment, a reflection on the evening's triumph and a quiet promise to herself to continue pursuing her passion. She knew that her talent was not just for applause or recognition, but for the joy it brought her and the inspiration it could offer to others. Over the next few days, the young waitress noticed subtle changes in her life. Guests from the event who had approached her with admiration began to reach out, inviting her to perform at other venues, concerts, and private gatherings. Each opportunity was both exciting and humbling, a reminder that her dedication and courage had opened doors she had never imagined. She accepted the invitations with a mix of excitement and careful consideration, determined to make the most of these chances to share her gift. Her coworkers noticed a change in her as well. She moved through the restaurant with confidence, greeting guests with a quiet assurance that came from knowing her own worth. They admired the way she carried herself, the calm determination in her movements, and the subtle pride that now accompanied her work. She had become a symbol of what could be achieved through talent, perseverance, and courage, inspiring those around her to pursue their own passions with dedication. The young waitress also reflected on the lessons she had learned that night. She realized that opportunities often appeared in unexpected places, that courage could transform fear into triumph, and that talent, when shared, had the power to inspire and change perceptions. She understood that her music was more than a personal pursuit. It was a bridge to others, a way to connect and communicate that transcended words and appearances. As she continued to practice and perform, she found that each new opportunity brought not only recognition but also growth. Her skills improved, her confidence deepened, and her understanding of the impact of music expanded. She learned to balance her work at the restaurant with her musical pursuits, finding a rhythm that allowed her to nurture both her passion and her responsibilities. Each day brought new challenges and new experiences, and she embraced them with the same dedication that had carried her through the unforgettable night of her first performance. In time, the young waitress realized that her life had changed in ways she could never have predicted. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, shared her talent with the world, and discovered a sense of self-worth and purpose that had been waiting for her all along. The wealthy guests who had once doubted her now served as a reminder of how assumptions could be challenged and how courage and dedication could overcome prejudice. She continued to play, both in private and in public, letting her music guide her through the journey ahead. Each performance became an opportunity to connect, to inspire, and to grow. She understood that her story was not just about a single night or a single performance, but about the ongoing pursuit of passion, the courage to embrace opportunities, and the joy of sharing one's gift with the world. And so, the young waitress, once overlooked and underestimated, found herself on a path of transformation. From serving tables to leaving a wealthy crowd speechless on the piano, she had discovered the power of talent, determination, and courage. Her journey had begun in quiet practice rooms and humble beginnings, but it had led to a moment that would define her future and shape her dreams. As she reflected on her journey, she knew that this was only the beginning. The piano, her music, and her dedication would continue to guide her, opening doors to new experiences, new audiences, and new opportunities. She had learned that even in the most unexpected places, extraordinary talent could shine, and that the courage to share it could change not only her life, but also the hearts of those who were fortunate enough to witness it. In the quiet of her apartment, as her fingers danced across the keys, she smiled, knowing that she had found her true path. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician, a storyteller, and an inspiration. And with each note, she carried forward the lessons of that unforgettable night, ready to embrace whatever the future held with confidence, passion, and grace.